kindly take stage. Now the Department of Psychiatry, Dr. Harshay, my dear colleagues and students. All of us here are here to learn. We are studying. And what we are...
Thank you, Vaishali madam. Thank you, Vaishali madam. Dr. Shobha Shira, Associate Dean, Dr. Vaishali Gaikwad, our Superintendent, Dr. B.C. Patil, my colleagues from various departments, and my very dear students. It has been my long-held dream to invite Dr. Shobha Shira to address all of us. She is a teacher of excellent abilities, very well informed, and every single lecture from her is an academic feast. You will soon discover that. Introducing her will be just belaboring the obvious. She is a person of such eminence that she needs no introduction. This statement is a cap which fits very few people. I have no hesitation in openly saying that Dr. Shobha Sharan is one of them. I won't spend any more time on the dais because that will mean I'll be eating into the precious minutes which Dr. Shobha Sharan has so kindly agreed to spare for us. So any more time which I take on the dais will be time wasted. So without wasting any time, may I now ask Dr. Shobha Sharan madam to assume the dais? Please, madam, the floor is yours.
Why is it not coming? Just okay? That's okay. Yeah.
Started the ball.
Oh, it's not. Yeah. क्या रिपीट? ये इसमें नहीं हो रहा है.
कब आएगा? Just a minute. PowerPoint slide show मोड में नहीं चल रहा. Yeah.
The lights at the back. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm audible at the back? No. That's the problem with handheld mics. Yeah. Thank you. It's with great pleasure that I'm here this morning. After being received by your MS, your Dean Academic Secretaries, I'm happy to have come to Colombo. Dr. Harshay is an old friend. So your Vice Chancellor, who was with Alex. I've known him for many years. I thought that I would cover this topic because Scholastic Mathematics will allow me to take you across the gamut of child issues and adult issues. If the ones in the back can't hear, you must tell me. Just raise your hands. Am I audible? Am I audible at the back? Can you hear me at the back? The moment you sit at the back, it means certain things, no? So, anyway, I thought that I would start by telling you that this is a very interesting book. How children learn and how children fail. If any of you are interested, just read it, easily available. It also tells you a lot of things that you could do for yourself. And I was happy to learn that I would be speaking to a large number of undergraduates. Because I think undergraduates are people who will learn quickly and also who are potential parents themselves. And so I think that talking to undergraduates is much nicer. So school life is a source of the child's greatest satisfaction, as well as a setting for some of the most troublesome conflicts. When I speak in the medical college, I do understand that graduates here are practically the cream of society as far as scholastic abilities are concerned. Because you come to a medical school because you're very good in academics. So in that sense, this may not apply to a lot of you here, and you may not exactly resonate with some things that I say. But if you remember your class in school, you will find that in a class, for most children, school is a nice place. But do you think school is always a nice place? How many of you don't think school is always a nice place? Put your hands up. All of you think school is a very nice place? Put your hands up if you don't think it's a nice place. Sometimes. I can see that movement of hands is not possible in the class. For some reason, nobody wants to put their hands up. Alright, doesn't matter. You must remember that your teachers are ahead. So such a number of children have problems in school. And when I say problems in school, I'm talking about academic problems. Reading, writing, spelling, and math kind of problems. So such a mother said, no, this child is not doing very well in school. Or you have a 15-year-old brought to you for some problem, and a casual question, how's the child doing? Mother says, no, child is not doing very well in school. So there are reasons why children don't do well in schools, why they don't do well in academics. And what could be the reasons? You might have factors which start in early childhood, or you will have factors which start in late childhood. When you look at factors in early childhood, you may have factors in the child or you may have factors in the environment. Same thing when the onset is in later years. So you will find that there are some children who are doing well in school in the young years, in the young classes. But as they come to 8, 9, 10, 12, they are not doing very well. So you will actually be interested to find out why someone is not doing well. What are the reasons for that? I don't know whether people at the back can see. But when there is onset in early childhood, there are factors in the child. The first one might be intellectual disability. How many of you have seen children with intellectual disability? How many of you have seen children with intellectual disability? Yeah. You will see that the very severely, that is previously it used to be called mental retardation. So the very severe mentally retarded or the very severe intellectually disabled won't come to school because they're very severe. But the children with mild and moderate intellectual disability will come to school because in the young classes, it's not such a challenge for academics. So you have children with mild intellectual disability who can come to school. So that might be one of the reasons. Then you have children with sensory handicaps, difficulty in listening, difficulty in vision. These difficulties can also cause children not to do well in studies. You will also have a condition called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We also call it ADHD. Now, ADHD also is a condition which starts in the very young. Here, the child might be of normal intelligence, and I'll talk to you a little more about it, but will have attention and concentration difficulties. And then you have other specific developmental disability. How many of you have heard the term dyslexia? How many of you have heard the term dyslexia? Yeah. I expect more and more of you to know because young doctors must know about dyslexia. This dyslexia is a specific disorder in learning and it causes untold misery for young children. Untold misery. And then we have factors in the environment, which can be in the family or it can be poor teaching methods. Then you have poor school performance in later years. That is, the child has reached high school and then the child is not doing well in academics. And the reasons may be emotional problems, conduct problems, drug and alcohol abuse, or a lot of extracurricular activities. All these things can cause trouble in later classes when an apparently okay child starts doing poorly in academics. And these might be the factors in the environment. All of you might have gone through these yourselves or might have battled with it yourselves. Peer pressure, problems with teachers, change of school, over expectation, discordance in the family, and significant life events. These problems in the environment can cause a young person to do poorly in school as they grow older. I have, you know what classifications are meant for? We classify for convenience. But in true life, in true clinical practice, things don't fall into clear compartments. You know that. A person will have a disorder of one kind, he will also have a disorder of another kind. The same person can have two, three disorders all mixed together. Nature actually makes it that way. But we artificially make to classify because we want to communicate, we want to do research. We artificially make boundaries now categories. So we know that a child who has a poor school performance may have any one of these reasons, but may have a combination of these factors as well. It stands to understand that. So a person can have trouble at home, might have trouble in school, and might have trouble within, and therefore might not be doing well in studies. So a detailed assessment is needed when a person has. So a detailed assessment is actually a medical evaluation because the eyes, the ears, everything have to be checked. The child has to be examined, and a detailed assessment has to go on. You have to get information from the school, and you have to get all these kind of information. So after a detailed history and a school history, we go ahead with some kind of input. So I'll go one by one through some of these areas. I don't know whether many of you have finished pediatrics. How many have finished pediatrics? Yeah. How many of you have finished pediatric courses? I won't ask questions, yeah? Put your hands up. Yeah. What do you think? I'm going to ask you a viva here. Of course not. Yeah. So, one of the things that you have learned in pediatrics is that there's a group of disorders called developmental disorders. And under developmental disorders, you have these categories. All these come under developmental disorders, which means these problems start when the child is very young. They tend to go on. They tend to run a chronic course. They are mild, moderate, or severe in people. Many of the developmental disorders may have a family history of some other developmental disorder. All of them can be improved, but 100% cure is hard unless developmental disorder is mild. So all these categories fall under developmental disorder. And we are interested in intellectual disabilities, communication disorders, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorders, and autism. Because all of the mild cases with these problems will come to school. They come to study and they have trouble in school. Alright. I've spoken about this, and what we have repeatedly found is developmental disorders are not easily recognized by parents and doctors. So when you don't recognize developmental disorders early, intervention is poor. The brain is developing. All of you know about the plasticity of the nervous system, isn't it? So if the nervous system is trained repeatedly, this plastic nervous system can develop. And that does not happen if you don't intervene early. So this is intellectual disability. I spent some time on it already. What it means is that the person has an intelligence which is below expected, and the adaptive skills also are below expected. I want you to understand that an IQ score is just a number. Oftentimes you mustn't go by that number. Being very extraordinarily brilliant does not mean you will live a life of happiness. If you're average in intelligence, lots of people do quite well. So it's not necessary that your IQ scores have to be planned. So in intellectual disability, you have a suboptimum IQ score, and your adaptive skills, right? Adaptive skills also are less. What do we mean by adaptive skills? Adaptive skills is a failure to meet standards of personal independence and social responsibility. The young person does not know how to get on in daily life. The intelligence is not enough for that kind of problem solving. So when children have civil IDD, they don't come to regular schools. But if they have mild IDDs, they reach the regular schools. Then we have children with specific language impairment. When you say specific language impairment, that means all other milestones are normal, only speech and language is there. Now these children also have a lot of trouble because it has been found that quite a number of children who have speech language impairment also have academic learning impairments. So they do poorly in academics. They may learn speech and language, but his academic skill can become difficult. So if you have a child who has speech language delay, the family must be spoken about in terms of stimulation, pre-reading skills, and pre-writing skills must be preventive interventions you will do for children who have speech language problems. So this is also another developmental disorder. And then we have this group of disorders called dyslexia or specific learning disability. What happens in specific learning disability? The child has problem in reading, writing, spelling, math, grammar, full works. A child may not have all this. It is known that in medical school there is one specific learning disability which is common. Which one do you think? Mathematics, specific mathematics disability. How many in this group have it? If you don't put your hands, you are lying. How many in this group have specific mathematics difficulty? In school at least. Come on, put your hands up, there will be more. Because it is known that people who have math problems don't go for engineering. If you have math problems, go to medicine. Yeah, I'm sure. You can see from the noise that everybody has had of some kind or other. So, specific mathematical problems, because doctors are also notoriously have writing problems. Notorious for writing problems. Also notorious for spelling problems. Because they will just scratch and scribble and squiggle and finish. You don't have to read the spelling, you have the general gesture. What is it? Enough. Don't say whether E came first or the I came first. Doesn't matter. Okay. So you will find that specific reading, writing, spelling and math disabilities can be mild, moderate or severe. So if a child has mild disabilities, but general intelligence is alright, the child makes up by guessing, by writing badly, by doing well in other subjects. The child overcomes this problem not by learning the spellings, but by pure and because of general intelligence. So what therefore happens? You can see that's a problem with mics. I'm sure I'm not audible at the back. Am I? Now the definition of specific learning disability, the point you must make is, if a child has poor schooling, you can't call that disability. So the child has had poor schooling. With adequate schooling, with adequate teaching, the child is still not learning, then only it becomes a disability. So when you look at specific learning disability, Remember I told you 5 to 20% is learning problems. Specific learning disability is about 1.5 to 5% of our class. I won't go into this, you cannot see the back, but I wish to tell you that specific learning disability and all disabilities have their substrate in the central nervous system. There are problems in the central nervous system and there are processing difficulties, and that is why developmental disorders are. So what must you do? At the first sign that a child is not doing well in academics, one must intervene. One must give the child adequate inputs. So if you get the child is in kindergarten and the mother is saying, going to first standard, child is still not writing. The rest of the class is writing. The child is still not working the fingers properly. So there is no need to label the child as writing disabled. But the child definitely needs to get inputs. You must start giving the child activity of the occupational kind which allows the fingers to move. So a lot of hand skills have to be given to the child. Now who will talk about giving hand skills? The teacher must know something about this, or the pediatrician, or the family doctor, the GP. All of them must know that if the mother complains that the child is not writing and all the rest of the classmates are writing, then there are issues in the way the child is having fine motor difficulties. So if there are fine motor difficulties, some hand function and occupational therapy will have to be done. There is no need of labeling a young child. And you cannot label a young child as specifically learning disabled. All you know is that there are deficits. Compared to the class average, this child is not doing. So an adequate amount of inputs have to be given. What happens otherwise is because our society at the moment is so overtaken by academic expectations that mother and father will harass the child. And the harassment will go to the extent that the child can't stand the paper and pencil. Because the child is so upset with having been punished, grumbled at and scolded. What this means then is that children with developmental disabilities actually suffer from a double whammy. They have troubles themselves because of the disability. In addition, the family and the school causes trouble for them. So the pediatrician or the physician will have to explain to the family that they have to go easy on a child who's lagging behind. So inputs have to be given. If attempts fail, then they must go in for more activity. As you go to higher classes, suppose you have a child who has come to class 8 having significant writing problems or significant spelling problems, significant reading problems. What can you do for a child who has these kind of problems? I don't know how many of you are aware. There is something called remediation, where you train that skill, or there is accommodation. So as the child grows older, in 9th and 10th, it is very hard to do remediation for that child. No child will sit and take tuitions again and again to learn something very basic. So you do accommodation. State syllabus, CBSE, ICSE, all of them allow you that if the child is marked as disabled in reading or writing, you can allow the dropping of first language or second language. Not first language, second language or third language. You can drop and the person can take his 10th standard exam without taking the second and third language. If the child has math disability, ICSE and CBSE allow that the child drop maths and do something else. So these are accommodations. You must be, as doctors, you must be aware that accommodations must be given. Because you make the life of the child less miserable by allowing the child to drop the subject that they do poorly. If the child has difficulty in writing, a scribe can be given. So these are accommodations that must be remembered and must be passed on to our families when they come, because they don't know. And many schools don't take it up, because if they take it up, it's more trouble for the school. So they behave as if they don't know about this circular at all. So these are some useful sites. that you might actually visit and understand what does the government provide. By now you must know, by the time the government becomes aware and takes action, the problem is pretty big. So there is action now being taken, and there is a need for all of you to be aware that parents can give relief to their children. Alright, so I have covered specific learning disability. The other group of conditions that we will talk about is about poor school performance and ADHD. These are the classic features of people with ADHD. How many of you in this room consider yourself overactive? How many of you consider yourself overactive? No? That's not possible. Because if you take activity level of this group and plot it in a Gaussian curve, you will find a certain number of children or people who fall on the hyperactive side, a certain number on the underactive side, and the bulk of you will be in the middle part of the Gaussian curve. So, all in attention, concentration, and impulsivity, these are traits found in the community. When all these three features come together as severe, then the person becomes a child with ADHD. And I want you to remember, there are lots of ADHD children and there are lots of ADHD adults. If it is mild, the ADHD actually can be made use of. If there is severe ADHD, a person with severe ADHD can have a lot of these kind of difficulties as they grow older. Because things come in the way. Attention and concentration is poor, so they get into relationship problems, they get into work problems, they have motor vehicle accidents, lot of substances abuse because they have a diagnosis of ADHD. So ADHD also can be treated. You can't see at the back. ADHD can be treated. The severe ones need medication and they also need other kinds of training. But it's a treatable and a manageable condition. I have now finished first school performance in early childhood. I'm now talking about a first school performance in later years. And we spoke about the possible problems children have. I'm sorry about this slide, but I will tell you, this is another website that I wish you to see. This website is very useful. It's a WHO website on mental health facts. You can use it because you can use it for presentation because it has a lot of data behind it. And it will actually tell you what is the current state of mental health in the world. So what does it say? About half of the mental disorders begin before the age of 14. Half the mental disorders before the age of 14. So there's a chance for intervention. I'm now talking not about developmental disorders. I'm talking about schizophrenia, mood disorders, OCD, anxiety disorders, panic, and that kind of disorder. So half the disorders start in childhood. The other thing is that suicide is the second leading cause of death, suicide, in the age group of 15 to 29. And you do know that suicide is such a waste of precious life. And suicides are highly correlated with mental illness and substance abuse. And both mental illness and substance abuse, intervention can occur. So suicides can be prevented. And of course, there's a big shortage of psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses, psychologists, and social workers. There's a great need for people to go into training. So you are a group of undergraduates here. I'm hoping that each batch will have a small number at least of people who become psychiatrists. Psychiatry worldwide has still a lot of jobs open. In India, of course, massively there is a need, but all across the world, psychiatrists are in great demand because the number of psychiatrists are low. The next point that I would like to make is that an important part of any child's work is schoolwork. And if school is a very boring and sad work, and if the child is doing poorly in school, a child who is doing poorly in school has low self-esteem, thinks of himself or herself very poorly. That child can have a whole lot of problems like this, both emotional and conduct. So children with emotional problems, we have children who run away because they can't do well in school, children who drop out or who go away from home, children who truant, children who become depressed. So we have a whole lot of psychiatric symptoms that can occur as a consequence of not doing well in school. Motivation is a concept that is very hard to understand. It's very hard to make out what motivates people. And we do know that if I am doing poorly in academics or poorly in something, I am not motivated to do that subject. So if I am poor in cooking or stitching, I am not going to go repeatedly and go cook and stitch. So if a child is not doing well in academics, why would the child again and again go back to do academics? But the child has no option. The father, the mother, the school, the whole lot sit on the child's head. So we believe that children who are doing poorly in school are actually people who are potentially very, very vulnerable for many kinds of disorders, and that needs to be understood. I wish to touch on some issues that happen in adolescence. The first point, the bodily changes, I'm not going to talk about. Emotional changes. You know that the emotions in an adolescent are different. There are certain tasks in adolescence, like attaining independence and identity, establishment of a sexual role and orientation, self-control of aggression and oppositional impulses. These are all tasks of adolescence. When a person is in adolescence, these are the things the person has to overcome, master, and learn. Then there's another thing happening in adolescence. There are brain changes. It is known that in pre-adolescence, there's an increase in gray matter volume, and this decreases in adolescence as a consequence of pruning. And you will see in the next slide. This is the brain. Imaging of a brain, 5-year-old, pre-teen, teen, and 20-year-old. Blue and purple parts are parts of the brain which are fully mature. So as the brain develops, the development of brain occurs like this, from occipital to the frontal pole. So the prefrontal cortex, which phylogenetically for us is the last to develop best in humans, the seat of executive functions, the seat of judgment, decision making. These are the last to develop. And therefore it is known that adolescent brains take some time for this. And again, this is again not an absolute all or none law. It can happen early in some, it can happen a little later in some. But definitely, executive functions are the last to develop. So brain changes are also occurring in adolescence. And then of course I've already told you that about half the mental disorders start before the age of 14, and suicide is the second leading cause of death in 15 to 29 years. So we are talking about adolescents who are going through all this and who also have to do very well in academics. And then there are factors in the environment which can cause trouble for adolescents. Okay. This is not just in adolescence, it can happen in any child or adolescent, that a child may develop or an adolescent may develop a problem because of certain issues which are family related. There is something called chronic adversities. And one of the chronic adversities that young people can have is to have a parent with a mental disorder. When a child or an adolescent lives with a parent who has a mental disorder, then the role of the parent in parenting is no longer there. The child parents the mother. So the roles are reversed, and there is a strain on the young person if there is a parental mental disorder. Repeatedly, we are aware of children who have a father who alcohol abuses. And when a parent alcohol abuses or has a serious mental disorder, you will find that the youngster will not tell this to anybody. It is a secret that has to be kept. So this young person suffers from many problems, including the problem of having to hide that the parent has a problem. So that's a very significant adversity. Bereavement. When there's a loss of a loved one, the effect of divorce and discord. Divorce and discord affects children of all ages. Lots of people say, oh, he's an adolescent, it does not matter. She's an adolescent, the parents have now divorced. But divorce and discord affects children no matter what their age is. The other issue that I wish to talk about is physical and sexual abuse. Lots of young people are physically abused and sexually abused. And sexual abuse of young people is not something that is spoken about. Studies have been done repeatedly, and it has been known that girls and boys are equally sexually abused. Whenever you talk about sexual abuse, one usually thinks of a girl child being or a lady being sexually abused. It can be a boy who is sexually abused. And a study in Kerala and some other states showed that the number of boys who are sexually abused is significantly wide. And sexual abuse, because it's a secret, and oftentimes the abuser or the perpetrator is somebody known to the person. It might be a family member, a father, an uncle, a cousin, a neighbor, a teacher, a colleague. So oftentimes, the person who's the victim of a sexual abuse is under great psychological stress. And these kind of people have great difficulty in doing many activities, including academics. And because sexual abuse is not something that you talk about, it is never known. It has been found that doctors are people to whom young children and adolescents disclose. And they don't disclose by saying, I have been abused. They come for something else, and then the doctor asks some question, and then that's a chance for the young person to talk about. So I want all of you to develop the ability to ask few questions regarding suicide and regarding abuse routinely in your practice. And don't be worried that the family will accuse you of putting ideas into the child's head. Many families say that, isn't it? Don't ask about it, because when you ask, you're suggesting something. No, you're not. For example, if you're talking about suicide, you will say something like, in the last 1 month or in the last 2 months, has life become so difficult for you that you have thought sometimes you better die? Have these thoughts gone into your mind? Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. How many of you have thought sometimes that life is not worth living, it's better to die? Put your hands up. How many of you? Come on, put your hands up. Yes, of course. Of course. It's perfectly normal to have a passing thought. To have a passing thought, what a terrible place this is, better to die. It's a passing thought. So most people have passing thoughts. Most people. But we are talking about persistent thoughts. This thought comes in your mind. So you will ask the youngster, has it happened? If it has happened and you are asking, yeah, can I have silence please? Yeah. You know something is an issue, but after that topic there is talk. So it is talkable. It's a talkable point. You must make it talkable to the young person by asking a question. If the child has had this thought, he will say yeah. If he hasn't had the thought, he will say no. Even though he hasn't, the next visit he may talk to you about. The point is, you have made a point of telling the youngster that I can talk about dying. I can talk about killing oneself. The same thing you will do when you're talking talking about child sexual abuse. You can ask a young person, has anything happened to you that has made life difficult for you? Something that another person did to you, showed to you, made you do, that made you uncomfortable, that made you upset, that made you troubled. If the person has had an experience, they will say yes. If they haven't, they'll say no. Then they can ask you, what do you mean? On the other hand, there are people whom you ask once, they won't tell. They go back and think about it because you asked, and the next time they gather the courage to come and say, you know, you asked about it the other day, and yeah, I had this mistake done to me at this time. The reason why you must bring it up is once the person talks about it, then some healing can happen. Are you aware of a law called the POCSO law? It's something that you must be aware. It is a recently enunciated law which talks about sexual abuse and the need to report sexual abuse. Okay. All right. So that is briefly what I wanted to tell you about sexual abuse. And then there is the expectation of academic excellence. And a lot of times, mothers and fathers are responsible for putting this kind of thing on children's heads. I recently spoke to a group of people at the Bangalore Medical College. And then a young lady came to me and said, ma'am, is there any way of counseling parents regarding the fact of how many marks people in medical colleges can get? Because she said that she has an engineering brother who's doing engineering and she's doing medicine. The brother with engineer, tell me what kind of marks he gets? 80, 90, 95. And this girl said, I'm able to get 72, 75 is my maximum in medical college so far. That itself is a big number, isn't it? Isn't it? Huh? Yes. 50. I 50 is enough. Because if you are doing 50 marks, that means you're cut about the rest. All the rest becomes bonus. But here is this girl getting 72 marks and her brother getting 95. And she said, my brother knows that it is hard to get madam, but when my father and mother are scolding me, he will also join. And he will also say, yeah, why don't you get a little more marks? So you can see that the need to get academic excellence of that kind is often born out of ignorance. And it's very hard for young people when their parents start making demands. Okay. This is another point that I would like to make, and I'm only going to talk about the first one, which is temperament. You know what is temperament? Temperament is something that you are born with. It is what you are hardwired. So it might be how active you are, how easily you get angry, what is your rhythmicity, what is the kind of emotions you have, how quickly you fly off the handle. So it has been found that very young children, as young as 1 year, you can divide them into children who are easy children, slow to warm up, and difficult children. So these are temperamental attributes. So all of us coming to this world with certain attributes. Depending upon our environment, our upbringing, and our experiences, this temperament is either polished nicely and it grows well, or it is polished such that one end sticks out, or we become more upset, more troubled. So temperament is our style of function. It is a subset of personality. Personality is more than temperament. So, depending upon the way we are, the kind of people we are, the style of functioning we are vulnerable. People who are very inhibited are vulnerable for emotional problems, anxiety, depression, because they are very inhibited. They don't talk about it, they're very shy, they don't open up, they won't talk, everything goes inside. So temperament plays a role in making you vulnerable for certain kinds of disorders. When you talk about things that happen in later years, alcohol and drug abuse are a problem. And you know that these are some indications that things are not going all right when drug abuse and alcohol happen. The point I would like to make is this. A lot of young people who come with drug abuse and alcohol problems have started in adolescence. But one of the issues that happens is parents don't bring them for help. Parents discover, and it takes a long time before they are brought for help. There's a great need to have this in the beginning itself. Because, for example, alcohol, cannabis, these are all gateway to bigger drugs. They can be gateways to bigger drugs. So there's a great need for families to be told that if they take these attitudes, then they never bring the child. But if they talk about it as a problem, as a disorder, as an illness, and we know that alcohol and drug abuse, genetically also there are people who are more vulnerable to abuse. Genetically, it can come down. So it is to be seen as a disorder, and therefore it is to be seen as something that can be helped. The challenge is not about changing the environment so much. We can only do that much. You know, for alcohol and drug abuse, that alcohol is a great source of revenue for the state. Great source. You think it will dry up? You think somebody will close it down? Of course not. Many states have tried, but you end up having another kind of problem. So, you cannot change the environment beyond the point. Our aim must be that we have to make the youngster more resilient. The person must be able to face and overcome these difficulties. So resilience refers to a dynamic process. It encompasses a positive adaptation within the context of adversity. You face an adversity, you overcome that. That makes you more resilient. So resilience is something that we want to be developed. What has been found is that if you want to make youngsters resilient, the presence of a close, having a good family is there. Besides having a good family, an adolescent must have a good relationship or a mentor, an extra-familial mentor. So one of my advice for all young people is, in medical college days, try to look for a good mentor. Get a mentor to whom you can ask, you can check. It might be a PG, it might be a junior lecturer, it might be a senior person, anybody. But when you develop a good relationship, a good confiding relationship with an outside person, and that is what we advocate for a lot of difficult youngsters. We tell the family, try and see that your child becomes friendly. Get somebody, a close by auntie, a close by uncle, a maternal uncle or a paternal uncle, whom the child can go and open up to, because that makes for a good relationship and makes the person more resilient. So these are the attributes. I've already spoken about it. Now there is some work done on what constitutes a resilient person. And these are some of the stuff which makes for resilience. Who are people who are resilient? People who are resilient have only good IQ. They don't have superior IQ. They have good coping skills. They also have something called a locus of control. If I have a problem, you will often find that we blame it on another. I came late because cook came late, because that person came, the mess opened late, there was no water in the mess, or whatever it is. So my problems are always because of somebody else. There, the locus of control is outside. But people who are resilient have locus of control inside. What can I do to overcome this? What can I do to make this okay? So locus of control being inside is a good value. And of course, having a sense of humor. How many people here think they have a sense of humor? How many people think you have a sense of humor? You all are a very sad lot here. Very sad. What are you saying? An ability to cultivate a sense of humor is something that you can work upon. An ability to laugh at yourself, not at others. Okay. I would like, I'm nearly at the end of my presentation. Uh, you will see that this is actually our aim for all children. For all children. Every one of our children, we would like them to feel good about themselves. All this. This is the same for children who are scholastically backward also. Academic skills is only a part. The most important thing is life skills. People must have life skills to be happy. All of you will be aware that in your medical college days or in your school days, you had a friend who wasn't doing very well, who was in the middle of the class, didn't do very well. 20 years later, you find he's top of the pops. Somewhere he's doing something, or she's doing something wonderfully well, earning, happier, having a lifestyle which you envy. And you didn't think that that was possible when he was in school or she was in school. What changed? What was different for that person? That person had some other attributes. So, oh, what happened? Once again, not finished. Not finished. You know when you clap, what is meant for the speaker, no? It means time to go. I know it's getting to be lunchtime. So there are some points to remember. Scholastic backwardness has many reasons. Developmental disorders must be recognized early. Parents, family doctors, pediatricians, and teachers play a big part. Academics is just one part of growing up. Temperament and experience play their part. Life skills are essential. Are you aware that WHO has 10 life skills? You must be aware. There is this booklet available. It's available on the net. What are life skills and how can they be taught? I mean, they can actually be taught in schools. So you can do something about it. Okay, I will end with this poem written by a lady whose website is very well visited. It says, if I had to raise my child again, I'd build self-esteem first and the house later. I'd finger paint more and point the finger less. I would do less correcting and more connecting. I'd take my eyes off my watch and watch with my eyes. I'd take more hikes and fly more kites. I'd stop playing serious and seriously play. I would run through more fields and gaze at more stars. I'd do more hugging and less tugging. And that is what most young parents should be doing for their young people. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions for Madam, very elaborate lecture, very informative, and something that we can incorporate in everyone's life. So anybody has any questions, please do come forward with them. If there are no questions, I would like Dr. Harshek, head of the Department of Psychiatry, to kindly give a vote of thanks. Before that, I would request you to kindly felicitate our speaker with a certificate and a bouquet and a memento.
Let's switch this on. Yeah, you can.
Bringing Madam here one day was one of my long-held dreams. As I said earlier, bringing Madam Shobha here one day was one of my long-held dreams. I am here to meet a beta teacher. I am here to meet someone who has understood the topic at hand so well. In fact, she had been my guide all along. I really thank her for spending so many hours for us and enlightening us with such a brilliant lecture. Madam, as a token of appreciation, please accept this.